You guys are the best right now. You're number one in the country. And I
Feels good.
add this statistics to all my top 25s that actually make sense. I run through and count all the one loss teams, the two loss teams, the three loss teams, just to give some perspective on how many teams I'm having to deal with and rank and evaluate. There's only one of you. They're undefeated in all of college football, and it's been quite a ride. And certainly there are going to be some, well, there haven't on the scoreboard been any missteps, but the trip to Camp Randall was quite interesting and quite the tussle. And of course, the early season hiccups against Idaho and Boise State. But I got to imagine that you're overjoyed with not just the record, but this team going through a really strong conference and prevailing the way it has.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, you said it all so well, Mark. I'm a history guy. I love the Big 10, the Big 12, all the expansion, everything else. And then it hit my conference out here. We thought we were safe. And then when we got pilfered, it was a tough time, tough transition. But I think the Ducks made the jump better than anybody. I think ASU is doing really well too. I mean, shouts out to a bunch of the old West Coast Pac-8, Pac-10, Pac-12. We've been out here. And USC's coming. USC will get there, but a little shaky ground right now. But you'll be fine. But the idea for me is it's just I'm very proud of this Ducks team. I'm proud of the whole university. My son's a freshman there this year. I'm multi-generational. I didn't just pick this team. I was born on campus. So again, couldn't be happier. Now, I do think this could be the year, and I haven't thought that for a long time. The year that we had Marcus, who went to the national championship game against Ohio State, thought it was their year and was really disappointed walking out of that building in a very cold Dallas evening and thinking at that point, well, that was probably the Ducks' best chance. We'll never be back. And here we are, 10 years later, and they're in a great spot. Everything's opened up for them. The chaos of college football has not consumed them. And historically, the Ducks were always a part of the story of the chaos of college football in some way, shape, or form. So it's been a great year, and I can't believe it's happening. It went by very quickly. I only missed 2 games. I go to all the games here at Autzen. I have for years, and I went to as many road games as possible, and I'll be in Indy this Saturday. So I'm pumped up, man. It's a good time.
So this question is less about Penn State specifically. It's more about the Big Ten championship game generally. And of course, for every team, not just Oregon, it's a new era with the 12-team playoff. Obviously, getting the first round bye matters. So I'm not suggesting that this game doesn't really matter. But even if Oregon does win, still has to win 3 playoff games.
Yeah.
That's still a lot of heavy lifting to do. So just in terms of approaching this game, and, like the other playoff coaches, they're going to be looking at this game for insights on how to beat Oregon, how to figure out the Ducks, win or lose. And so do you think that influences the game plan, the way Dan Lanning and his staff go about this? Like, in other words, Ryan, do you think Oregon goes into this game saying, you know what, let's try and beat Penn State. Like, let's go after it, but without showing as many cards as we need to. Let's try and do this by just beating them up. Let's try and do this with the simplest game plans that we keep some cards hidden for a quarterfinal, semifinal, title game. Let's try and win this game. Like we'll play with 3,000% energy as you would expect from a Dan Lanning club. But just in terms of the game plan, the play selection, let's keep it simple and let's just try and outdo them, athlete them at all positions. How do you think the game plan comes together for Dan Lanning?
Well, I think that's a great question. I think that's a question that a lot of people are asking over this whole transition period when they went to the 12-teamer. They're going to keep the championship games, and then they said they're not going to punish anybody for the championship games if they lose. Well, a lot of college coaches are going to put out the vanilla. There's no other way around it because they're trying to keep a lot of stuff in their bag. They're just going to give you what they're going to give you. They're going to go play football. And I think there's a lot of in what Lane Kiffin said about how there's probably a benefit to not playing in the Big Ten championship game. I would say there's maybe a group in the Penn State camp that kind of maybe wanted to see Ohio State win that thing and then not have to be able to be involved with this thing. Because like you said, it is one more game. It's one more game of wear and tear, possible injuries, but it's also one more game and giving up your game plan and opening and exposing you to film, which is, again, the nightmare for these coaches. They don't want to leak any information. But I do think also, big picture, this was in the plans. This was already in the cards for a while. Terrence Ferguson said his family had rented an Airbnb in Indy in the summertime, just knowing that they were going to get, this is a confident bunch. And I can't say that necessarily all the fans were as confident, but I think that says a lot about the opportunity. When these coaches wheel out in the summertime, their game plan for basically the entire year, they know what they're kind of getting into. They open up that file each week. And, not to say that they didn't have a game plan on Penn State, but I bet somebody somewhere was putting together something on Penn State. I think, though, both these teams can go out there, and I think there's dudes on both sides of the ball. I'm really impressed. When I put the tape on for Penn State, there's some guys over there, man. 11 on the side. The defensive end is phenomenal. Obviously, their tight end, 44, is phenomenal. There's some guys over there, but you're right. The Ducks are very loaded. They're deep. They haven't had too many injuries really consume multiple groups in the offense or defense. I think they're really prepared for this thing. So I think you're onto something. I don't think teams are going to go into these games trying to lose. But I also don't think that if you're in a position where the Ducks are right now, where it feels like it's a win-win, that you need to go out there and show everything. At the same time, I think the Ducks play just their style. Whatever they're playing, they're playing. If they need to get a first down, they're going to get a first down because they're going to run the play that needs to get a first down at that point down. They're not going to think, well, let's not run this play right now because we'll save it for 2 weeks. But it is going to be tough. It's going to be trouble. I was talking to my mom today about it, just giving her the schedule, and she still kind of really hasn't wrapped her brain around it. She's 71. She's like, wait a minute, you have to play. You could play 5 games from now. I said, yeah, if you go through the conference championship and you lose and you have to play the first round, I mean, that's a lot of football.
Absolutely, it is. And Ryan, yeah, only through 12 games at this point. It's the end of the season, but in a sense, you're going to see more good football teams potentially than you have already the entire season, as you just outlined. Is there any facet of this team that turned out differently than you thought? Even though you expected this to be a championship caliber team, did it play out differently than maybe you thought, or maybe some unit or component of this team, or any particular player that broke out and became a better player than expected?
That's a great question. I would actually say the linebacker core. Going into this, you had Jeffrey Bossa, who was the guy. He's been to multiple media days as the face of the program on the defensive side. The guy's been in the program long enough, absolute stud, but he dealt with some injuries early, opened the door for Bryce Betcher to be the number 1 guy, and he's really just taken over. He's been the most productive linebacker of the whole group. He's fast. He's mobile. He's a center fielder. Gold Glove winning center fielder for the Ducks last year in baseball. And then, you had Justin Jacobs. He also was dealing with some injuries. So you looked like you had what you had in those 1-2 linebackers up the middle. They were both kind of gone. You had to have new guys step in. Devin Jackson is the other guy, incredibly fast player, one of the fastest players on the team, including fast as Roderick Pleasant, who was the 100-meter winner in California. I mean, you're talking about some serious burners out here. And if you got a linebacker doing that, it's crazy. So I just think it was kind of cool that halfway through the year, the linebacker corps had now 4 basically starting caliber middle linebackers that they could wheel out there. And it puts a lot of pressure on the defense. Tosh Lupoy, Dan Lanning has always been known for putting pressure on the quarterback from a variety of different places, not necessarily the traditional 4 up front, maybe a 4 look up front, but then bring a safety or bring a linebacker. And the last game we had against Washington, a very mobile quarterback, the freshman was playing first big, traditional start in his career. And, dude, first couple of plays was tough to get on him. So as soon as they figured it out, Betcher was on a blitz, came in and just swept the whole thing up. And from that point on, the Ducks went and had 10 sacks. I mean, so they were just blitzing all over the place. They were putting these guys in a blender. And I do think that the defense has been the star of the show this year. Offense has been what we thought it was going to be. Dylan Gabriel's been super solid. Running backs, wide receivers, great. But I think the defense is the star of the show.
So, the defense has been carrying this Oregon team. I fully agree with you. That said, we just saw Ohio State step on a rake against Michigan in a game that Mark and I are going to talk about after this segment with you concludes. And is anyone in Eugene kind of worried? Hey, this Ohio State offense actually looked pretty decent against our defense. Are you rethinking that Ohio State game in terms of the implications, in terms of also how strong the Big Ten has turned out to be this season, which, not that great. Like Penn State is the number 2 team in the Big Ten, and Penn State got handled by Ohio State at home. Indiana, amazing season, but did not get a marquee win against an elite opponent. Any worries in the Oregon camp about, that Ohio State game looks kind of worse? I mean, it was still a win, and it was a big one, but that game still looks worse now after what we saw from Ohio State and Michigan. What's the thought process there?
Those are great points. I absolutely love that. I'll give you 2 things on that one. First one, I think everybody who beat Ohio State or who lost close to Ohio State felt the Ohio State loss because it affects them, right? Indiana, it affects them. Obviously, Penn State was a close loss. Indiana wasn't a close loss. And then Oregon has the win against them. I think they all took a step back a little bit with the Ohio State performance. Because, again, I think that Ohio State being the bell cow here, but Ohio State being the team that you need to the tide that rises all boats. Now, go back to us in the Pac-12 out here. What would we be saying about this Big Ten conference if we weren't in it? Okay, if the Ducks aren't in this, and I say this on my channel, again, I talk for hours about some of this stuff. If we were in the West Coast, in our situation, first and foremost, the Ducks would only, in my mind, be the number 1 team at this very last second where they're the only remaining undefeated team. I don't think they would have been number 1 at all early on. But if you look at this Big Ten, we've said this for years. This conference we don't think is that quality from top to bottom. There's some holes in this conference. And when the top end of the conference doesn't play as well, it still has this promotion of, oh, they're the leaders of the Big Ten. Now we're in this situation. Now, I do think that we made it better. I think that USC made it better. I think that the Ducks, obviously, but that's an interesting point because if I'm outside of the conference, I have a much different perspective than if I'm inside the conference. And if I'm outside the conference, I'm talking about where's Indy's big win. If I'm inside the conference, now I'm a Big Ten guy. Now as a Big Ten guy, I'm like, dude, Indy, man, tough conference, only have 1 loss. And I'm promoting the brand. So it's weird how quickly that happens, and conference realignment brings us here.
Well, you would think after 12 games that we wouldn't play this game, but we do it all the time, and I have to kind of call people out. And I'm not saying that I have the perfect perspective or perfect judgment on this. I do my best.
You are the voice of college football, though.
I do my best, Ryan, but there's this constant game that people play when they say, okay, well, are you really that good? Well, we beat X, Y, and Z. Well, right. How good are they? Who did they beat? And then it becomes this round robin of that we're even possibly questioning wins against Ohio State. If we're questioning those, I don't know where we're going for quality wins at this point in the season. But this is something that a lot of people do.
Yeah, and I would actually then volley it back to the SEC and say, well, I think the SEC took a step back this year, and maybe some of those wins are promoted a little bit more than they should be and propped up, but we do this every year. That's why we have the 12-team playoff. Again, is what everybody wanted. I hope you like it. It's just like we have the dad that finally got us what we wanted at Christmas. We open it up and we're like, oh, God, I got to put it together now. It's like these people are immediately, they have exactly what they want. They have this playoff, and now they're like, God, this is it's going to be a lot of games. Yeah, exactly. That's what you wanted. That's what you wanted. So it's, in my mind, as a coach or a player, I would say it's 2 different seasons. Drastically. As soon as you get past the regular season, you're done. Now you got to regroup and do the whole thing over again. You got to buckle up. You got to get into the seeding game first. The championship game basically places you into the playoff. So that's your first week of the playoff, basically. And then you have all the other people on the outside of those championship games who are getting placed based on the seeding of where those other teams are, the domino effect. And then you got to go play your games. And I think at this point, the Ducks are in the driver's seat. And as a Duck fan, I am a very humble Duck fan. I've been through it all. I've seen it. I've been here from the 80s. I'm not a bandwagon guy. I don't believe the Ducks are always the best. Of course, I want them to win, but I've always seen flaws in some of these Duck teams. Most of the time on the defense, most of the time on the defensive line specifically. This year's very different. You have two guys in there who have really done a great job, transfer portal guys, and then you have other guys that have come through the system that are developed on site that have done a great job. That defensive line, one of those other things you asked about, Mark, maybe one of the position groups that was surprising to you, we just didn't know who we were going to get necessarily. And Derek Harmon, Jamar Caldwell has been fantastic for this defensive line, among other guys as well who have come through the ranks.
Okay, in terms of teeing up this Oregon-Penn State game, in terms of my thought process on what's going to happen, what's going to unfold, there are two clear avenues. And conference championship games are often these unique, emotional, situational cocktails because the flow and the rhythm of the regular season, now you get into just the one standalone game. It's almost like it's not a bowl game, but there's kind of it's like a quasi bowl game. Neutral field. It's suddenly you get into a different situation. So I'm thinking along two lines. The Penn State scenario is we have a chip on our shoulder. James Franklin's going to hear all week about he can't win the big game, can't win the big game, can't beat the elite teams. And Oregon, as great as this season's been and as great as this team is, hasn't lost yet. And so Penn State just might have more hunger than Oregon. Not to say that Oregon won't have a ton of hunger, but Penn State's going to be totally geared up for this game in a way that Oregon won't be. And maybe Oregon gets kind of a wake-up call. It gets exposed before the playoff, and Dan Lanning gets material that he can then gear up for in the playoff. That's one thought process. The other thought process is this is where Dan Lanning breaks through. This is where Dan Lanning gets a big stage matchup, and he doesn't have Kalen DeBoer on the other side. He doesn't have an elite X and O guy on the other side. And so Dan Lanning just eats James Franklin's lunch, and this is an Oregon steamroller. Two different thought processes. Where do you come down relative to those?
Well, I hate to say politically I find myself in the middle as well, but I do I do think that's fine somewhere in the middle. I think James Franklin has a gigantic can't win the big one narrative that he's going to have to break through at some point. And the Ducks are kind of can't win the big one team as a narrative. I mean, we're trying to break through the glass ceiling as well. So Dan Lanning, I feel like, is a foot on the pedal guy all the time. And the one thing I really like about Dan Lanning is man of the people. I just saw him after the game, shaking everybody's hand, autograph people, took pictures of me and my wife after the game, before the media. His guy takes time for the everyman. Not to say that James Franklin doesn't, but I think that Franklin has been in his position a little bit longer, a little bit more tenured, maybe a little bit more calloused in the world of college sports. And Dan Lanning's fairly new, fairly fresh, seeing things for the first time in a lot of cases. He's slowly made that transition, moved his way up the chain of, getting better every single year. This is the time. I don't think they take a step back at all. I think they're absolute foot on the pedal the whole time. And I think not that they have something to prove, but, this whole year, the conversation has been about everybody else. It's about, how could they lose? How could they lose? How could they lose? And if you look at the national media, not that I'm complaining. I'm not complaining at all. But there's not a tremendous amount of discussion of why Oregon is as good as they are. They say it in the broadcast, and they'll hit on it here and there. But I think a lot of the conversation about the storylines of this year has been the chaos. And about, oh, man, these are the teams that we didn't think were going to be there, and now they're there. And telling those stories is great because that's what the whole narrative is for college football, storylines. But I think Oregon has a very unique storyline as well. Again, 10 years away from the Marcus year, 15 years at the point, 14, 15 years after the last undefeated season that we had. The Ducks have been good, but to be able to be the best is a rare thing. And I think that's what they're really striving for. I think they have that as a number one goal. And I don't know if that's the biggest goal for everybody else out there. I definitely think that's where it is for Penn State. I think that's a huge thing. I think it is for Notre Dame. I think it is obvious for Georgia, Texas. Those are the things. Those are obvious. But for Oregon to be in this conversation right now is pretty unique. So we're going to take advantage of it.
And just to add to what Matt was talking about there, I get a feeling from college football fans that the respect level for Oregon, this particular Oregon team, not the overall brand, is much higher than it is for Penn State. And when I see the point spread at 3.5 points, it reminds me of season after season after season in the Big Ten Western Division, where Iowa was able to always be, they were never a large favorite against all these underlings in the Big Ten West. They were always like a 6-point favorite, a 4-point favorite, even against the Dreg, Purdue, Northwestern. But while the point spread wasn't large, the confidence level, like you could almost say you're 90-some% sure Iowa's going to win this game. It's going to probably only be 17-13, but they're going to beat Purdue this week because that's what they do. They just find a way to win. And I almost feel like it's similar here where the point spread isn't large, but there's a huge confidence level among people that follow college football that Oregon's decidedly the better team and will win this game.
I think Oregon's a lot more versatile, and I think they have depth at dang near every position group, which is really unique for them. You know, there's always been something that you could kind of hang your hat on if you're the other opponent. So we're going to take this away, and we're going to force them to beat us in way A or B. And I think that now, I think they're very versatile. If you try to take away the running game, their passing game is fantastic. They got a running back that, that can really move. They have wide receivers that are fast. They have big wide receivers. They got great tight ends. And the quarterback is phenomenal. He's played a lot of snaps. He's very cool, calm, and collected guy. He doesn't get too high, doesn't get too low. Can burn you with his feet a little bit when he needs to get a first down. A pretty crafty runner, just a really good football player, just a classic A1 football player. And I think that's what you really need. You know, the other thing that's unique about this Duck team, they huddle all the time. Remember all the years of no huddle out here. You know, these guys huddle every time. And I think that says something for me as a guy that not played offensive line. And I huddled during my era. I really like the huddle. I really like the quarterback coming in and gathering everybody up saying, hey, boys, we're doing this right now. Okay, we're doing this. We're going here. We're going there. Cool. Let's go. And there's something about the unity inside of that group that is that's special. And I feel like they can make the plays they need to make. Last year's group was really good. Top flight talent. They're in the NFL watching Bo Nix right now. Great team. But there's something special about this group this year. And they've proven it on the biggest stages so far. Yes, they had a little trouble in Wisconsin, but you knew that's going to happen to somebody somewhere. And this is the year where everybody lost that game. And Oregon didn't. So Oregon didn't get caught up in the chaos. So you got to tip the cap to them a little bit.
Let's talk about Dylan Gabriel. He's in the Heisman mix, and we can debate where he should stand relative to Travis Hunter and Ashton Genty and Cam Ward. I don't want to get into that. I want to get into this notion of how important, how central Dylan Gabriel has been to Oregon's success. And I think, the Heisman discussion has been a distraction in this sense. You look at all the other prominent programs, Norvell at Florida State, Hugh Freeze at Auburn, could even say Lincoln Riley at USC, struggling to get it right at the quarterback position. So many prominent programs have crashed on the rocks this season because they didn't get the quarterback position right. And Oregon definitely got it right. But with Dylan Gabriel, Ryan, my thought process is it's not so much that he's played to his ceiling, which I'm not necessarily sure he has, but he has such a high floor. That's where Dylan Gabriel separates himself from so many other transfer portal quarterbacks, that his default, his regular game is at a higher level than so many of the other failed transfer portal quarterbacks. He's giving you consistency. He's giving you experience, dependability. It definitely came through in the Ohio State game. It's come through in other key moments. To me, it's less about Gabriel being spectacular, which is what gets attached to a Heisman debate. It's more about how consistent he's been. What's the full sense of how Dylan Gabriel has performed, and Ryan, how these next few games define his legacy as an Oregon Duck?
Yeah, those are great points. I liken it to, he drives a minivan. right? So as a minivan, that's a high floor. You know exactly what you're going to get there. That's a dependable car. It's something that's very user friendly. You can do a lot of. There's all sorts of outlets in it. Everybody's got a plug in. You know, it's not fancy, but it totally gets you from A to B in comfort, in size and strength. You can get your offensive line in there. You can get your receivers in there. You know, Dylan Gabriel, when he first came out here, first and foremost, I got to give a lot of shouts out to him. I've had numerous conversations with him this year, and every time he makes you feel like you're important, and the moment that you're talking with him is what he wants to be doing right then and there. That's rare. That's rare, especially among elite players, guys that have their own bodyguard from the team pushing them around.
College. Like a lot of pro athletes don't do that.
Oh yeah, for sure. He's just very grounded. His family's awesome. I mean, he took a picture just the other night with my wife and I. You know, I got to introduce my wife to him because my wife doesn't go on the field with me very much after the games, and so blah 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 blah. The guy's just a great guy. And again, he would go out there and stay out there for an hour and shake every single one of those people's hands. He's that dude, and he knows this is important. This moment is important, and he's had enough experience. He's a guy who was given the keys as a freshman in high school for the varsity team. You know, that's, again, you're giving a 14, 15-year-old kid the keys to a varsity team. So he's had a lot of responsibility even before he got to college. And then, of course, he's been a starter since day one in college. And, you know, he came out here. He brought his receivers together. They went down. They had a little camp. They went down to Southern Oregon. They had a nice little throwing camp, got together, just bonded, hung out. And he united these guys immediately. There's also a real nice Hawaiian connection, right? Our center is from Hawaii. So is he. There's a couple other guys on that team that are. And there's just really good, strong vibes there. And you nailed it. His floor is so high, he doesn't make mistakes. Similar to kind of how we saw Bo Nix. You know, everybody from Auburn was like, oh, no, you're going to get bad Bo and good Bo. And we didn't really get bad Bo. We got like medium. There was maybe some issues here and there sometime. We got good Bo the whole time. I mean, he got injured, but he had a great time at Oregon. And I feel like Dylan Gabriel has just really united this team. He's a very good leader. He's not the type of leader who's going to slap you on the face mask and fire you up that way. He's got your back. He knows exactly what he's supposed to do, when he's supposed to do it. And cool, calm, and collected, man. He's that type of guy. One of my favorite stories of all time in football is the John Candy, Joe Montana story, where Joe Montana gets in the huddle and, hey, man, is that John Candy over there? And to hear the story from the O-line guys who were in there, they're like, you know, ready to go to war. And here he just breaks the tension, breaks that. And I had a high school quarterback just like that, who's just hilarious guy. And he comes in the huddle. He's like, all right, guys, here we go. Boom, boom. It's 4th and 10. We got to do this right now. Let's do it, kind of a thing. And there's something about that. Not everybody's like that. And not everybody is motivated the same way. But I feel like this team right now is very connected. I think Dylan Gabriel has a lot to do with that.
Folks, if you're not familiar, just to fill in the blanks, 1989 Super Bowl in Miami. I think it's either Randy Cross or Keith Farnhorst is telling this story of them going into the huddle. They're trailing the Bengals by 3 points. They've got 92 yards to go. There's about 3 minutes left in the Super Bowl. They get in the huddle. They're all wired and tense and, you know, focused. And Joe Montana kind of looks
one of the greatest Super Bowls of all time, right?
Yes, kind of looks through the gap of the offensive lineman in the huddle and goes, hey, guys, turn around. Is that John Candy? And just to break the ice and say, we got it.
And how funny was John Candy?
Got it.
John Candy's a guy, just looking at him, you laugh. He doesn't even have to say anything. He's already funny. So, no, I really like Dylan Gabriel. He's a guy who's just, again, rock solid individual. He cracks people up in the interviews. He cracks jokes to the press. You know, he's just that guy. So,
well, Ryan, it was great to have you here tonight. Matt, is there anything else you'd like to hit on? You know, since Matt and I are going to segue into this Ohio State fallout, I'll ask you this, Ryan. Again, great lover of college football and admirer of great programs, great teams, as you have been, and we've had the discussion many times. Have you seen anything like this Ohio State situation? And I'm not saying that Ryan Day doesn't have holes in his game, and we will march through them, certainly. But there's a guy, and I did a 3-hour live stream after the game. I did another 3-hour live stream later that night. This is all people could talk about.
I watched your stuff.
I was on Michigan podcast this afternoon. What else did I do? Who knows what? I can't even remember what else. And, a number of things have hit me, but I'll just make this one statement because I could preface this question for like 14 minutes leading into it, is that I listen to Ryan Day's almost on a weekly basis, the news conference, and he has a habit of saying this anytime there's a question where there's just a connotation of negative, like you need to improve in this area, the team needs to be better along the offensive line or anything. He almost automatically says this now after 5 years. He says, da 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 da. I realize I got to win every game. Like he says this often. He realizes there is no margin for error. As I heard Urban Meyer say a few months ago, when he first got the job at Ohio State, he was given two rules, two guidelines: graduate your players. Two ultimatums. Yeah, graduate your players. Win every game.
Yeah.
Not win a championship. You can't lose any of them, or and then you definitely can't lose that one. So just your thought about the pressure cooker that's Ohio State and the incredible state. I'm not talking about like one or two loons out there, like droves of Ohio State fans out there saying that even if this team goes on and wins the national championship, that Ryan Day should be fired.
Yes. Okay. Hey, put this into USC realm. Switch them. What do you think Lincoln Riley would be doing to that? I mean, come on. What do you think USC fans would be doing with this?
Oh, with a 10-2 football team that's going to the playoffs?
I mean, again, roll the red carpet out. They got to have a 10-year contract.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's USC. And we're talking, and there are people who are pissed about, and it's so crazy to me, the high expectation game. I get it. Everybody wants to win every game, but it's hard to win football games. It's hard to even score in college football. And, these guys have to do it every single week. They have to find ways to do it every single week. They're in an absolute pressure cooker. Ryan Day looks like he's dead. He doesn't even look alive anymore. His whole thing. I said it a couple years ago. He started to look like the bad guys from Superman, where they're on that ice planet with the dark beard. He was like one of those guys, right? He kind of turned into a heel a little bit. And I watched his press conferences as well. And it got negative. It never really got positive. I think him taking away the play calling really made him more susceptible, because if he was able to call plays, look at the situation. They said it over and over on the broadcast. You have that third, you have those the run, the tight end dump, and then another run sets up the field goal. He missed the field goal, right? That thing was played over and over and over and over and over. Those three downs, right? That was the second quarter, Mark. We're talking like this is where you need to win the game. You need to put points on the board. It's going to be difficult. And these guys are already second guessing him. It's the second quarter. These are the announcers. So it's like I immediately went to the Twitter. I saw all the people flaming him. Yeah, this is a team that has a Michigan problem. And I don't know why, because it feels like they're the better team. And even in the last couple of years when Michigan had a really, really good team, so did Ohio State. But it feels like they run up against a wall against these guys. And this year, you knew it was going to be trouble because the offensive line group for Ohio State, losing those guys in the offensive line was going to be a real trouble, because Michigan is their bread and butter, is that defensive line. And we saw it right away with the Ducks. We couldn't run the ball the way the Ducks wanted to. They had to start throwing the ball to open up the run. And Ohio State couldn't do that. Ohio State never could establish the run, and just made them one-dimensional. And then they got really tight. And I feel like Chip Kelly is just really stubborn. Chip Kelly is no longer the genius Chip Kelly that he once was. He is hardened and has been completely demoralized by football over the last 10 years. By going to the NFL, by doing all the other sort of stuff, he does regular stuff at regular speed now. He doesn't do all the crazy stuff anymore. And he's become more of a traditionalist. And he's just very stubborn. And he went in there thinking that they were going to be able to run the ball and get that touchdown. They didn't. Okay, let's throw the tight end dump. Nope. 1 yard. Okay, let's run it again. Nope. Oh, right. Well, let's get a field goal. Nope. And that's just demoralizing when you miss field goals against Michigan, who they're not going to score a lot of points. You got to get a touchdown. And I was thinking at the point, this might be 4-down territory. And it's the second quarter. But I was thinking to myself, this guy's got to get a touchdown right now. And then I go back, flashbacks to when Chip Kelly's our coach, and we go for it on 4th down, and we miss it on the goal line. So, seen that act before. So, no, it's a weird deal, man. Ohio State is a great team still. They're going to be in the 12-team playoff. They should have a good setup still. They still have great weapons offensively. They just got to get the ball to them. They got to utilize their team. And they can't lean on the running game if it's not there.
Ryan Winter from Sports Channel 503. Folks, it's 1 click away right here on YouTube. Get yourself ready for the Big Ten Championship game. Ryan, great to see you, man.
Hey, appreciate you and everything you do for college football, Mark. See you much. And best of luck to your Trojans next time. We'll see you next year, maybe.
We need some.
You'll get there.